Okay, all right. So, dear students, today we are going to discuss about menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle is also called female reproductive cycle or female monthly cycle. The average time for this cycle is 28 days, but it can be vary within females. For example, in some female, it can reach to 20, 32 days, 33 days, 35 days, but above that, it will consider pathology. In some female, it can also be less than 28 days, like 27, 25, 24, 23. Even it can reach to 21 days. But below 21 days, it can be considered pathology and the female should consult with the doctor. Even in the same female, the cycle can vary. Like, for example, in one female, her cycle is 28 days, but in her lifetime, this cycle can be vary. It can be maybe 1 month it is 28 days, next month it's 30 days, 32 days. So it can be vary because of, this cycle is under the control of different hormones. Because of that hormone fluctuation in the body, it can affect her cycle, right? Now, but mostly average time for this cycle is 28 days. So we are going to discuss about this cycle in detail. Okay, this cycle consists of different phases. The phase first is menstruation phase, right? It will start from day 1 to day 5. And menstruation phase, what is happening? The uterus lining, uterus the place where implantation of embryo happen. So the uterus lining, the endometrium lining of the uterus, it will break and will shed from the female body. It will come out through vagina outside in the form of blood. Right? Now, another phase we have follicular phase. In this phase, proliferation of endometrium lining will start again. It means development or thickening up endometrium lining will start again. You can see here under the influence of estrogen hormone. Another phase we have ovulation phase. In this phase, ova will release from this ovary to fallopian tube for fertilization. Usually ovulation happen at day 14, but it can be like 13, day 12, 15, 16, but average cycle of 28 days. In that cycle, usually it happen on 14 days. At 14th day, the ovulation will happen and ova will reduce to oviduct. Now another phase we have luteal phase. And luteal phase, corpus luteum will develop under the influence of luteinizing hormone. Okay. Now let us discuss about all these phases in detail. First of all, you should be clear about this. The part of brain that control this whole cycle, that is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is the part of brain that control this cycle, right? Now, hypothalamus will secrete a special hormone called goniotropic hormone releasing factor, okay, or gonadotropin releasing hormone. This hormone actually stimulates pituitary gland. Pituitary gland having two loop. One is anterior pituitary gland and there is posterior pituitary gland. But actually this gonadotropin releasing hormone, it will stimulate anterior pituitary gland. This anterior pituitary gland will start production of gonadotropic hormone. Gonadotropic hormones are those hormones that stimulate gonads, and gonads are actually reproductive organs. So in this cycle, this gonadotropic hormone will stimulate female ovary. Okay, now we have two types of gonadotropic hormone here, FSH and LH, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now let's see, I will start this cycle from day 1 to day 28. First, I will start from, let's suppose we are now in day 1. In day 1, what is happening in female body? The first thing is, it is the phase of menstruation. In this phase, bleeding happen from female body because of shedding of endometrium lining of uterus, right? In this time, hypothalamus is stimulating anterior pituitary gland and this that are producing follicle stimulating hormone. That follicle stimulating hormone will act on this primary follicle. This primary follicle are specialized cells that nourish the ova, okay, that cover the ova. So this follicle stimulating hormone will convert primary follicle into secondary follicle, right? First, remember, it is primordial follicle. Primordial follicle will stimulate and that will convert into primary follicle, and primary follicle will convert into secondary follicle under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone. And when this primary follicle converts into secondary follicle, that secondary follicle will start production of estrogen. Remember, the difference between primary and secondary follicle is in their cellular structure, and the secondary follicle is more mature. Okay, now what the secondary follicle will do, they will start production of estrogen. Okay, and secondary follicle will become more mature and that will convert into Graafian follicle. Within that, if you can see here, it is like a cavity, fluid cavity. This fluid cavity, it's contain nutrients for the ova. Okay, and later on this fluid cavity also help in the ovulation. Okay, because of the pressure will create in that cavity and ovulation will happen. Now this is now Graafian follicle. It become secondary follicle become more mature and that is called what, Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle will also start production of estrogen. Is already secondary follicle is doing production of estrogen. So it means if secondary follicle become more mature, still they are producing estrogen hormone. This estrogen hormone actually act on uterus lining and make the uterus lining thick. Make the uterus lining, increase the blood supply, develop blood vessel to the uterus lining, you can see here. And the uterus lining is going to become thick, right? This is called proliferative space. Why? Because proliferation of endometrium lining of uterus are going on here. Proliferation means division of uterus lining is happening and it become more and more thick and more spongy and more vascularized. Why it is happening like this? Because there is a chance of baby, so that it make thick this endometrium lining for the baby. If fertilization happen definitely embryo will implant here for that it make it more thick and vascularized. Second thing, estrogen also make within female cervix there is fluid, so make that fluid thin. That make that fluid thin. Why it make it thin? So that more and more sperm reach to this ova, because this ova have to be released to the oviduct, and there is a chances of fertilization. So for that, estrogen make the cervical within the female cervix, it make that fluid thin. Is it clear? Now, on day 14, like you can see it here from day 1 up to day 14, there is FSH and estrogen hormone, right? But what happened on day 14, there is a sudden increase in estrogen and follicle stimulating hormone. But estrogen increases more as compared to follicle stimulating hormone. So that sudden increase, sorry, yeah, there is a sudden increase in estrogen and follicle stimulating hormone, but estrogen hormone increases more as compared to follicle stimulating hormone. And that sudden increase of estrogen having positive feedback on what? On hypothalamus and pituitary gland. And you can see, like when the estrogen on day 14, when the estrogen level increase, so that will stimulate what? This pituitary gland, and that will stimulate hypothalamus. And that will, when it stimulates pituitary gland and hypothalamus, so pituitary gland will start production of LH hormone. It means that estrogen having positive feedback, like here, which mechanism happen? Positive feedback happen. Why? Actually, estrogen stimulate the production of a special hormone called what? Luteinizing hormone. And on day 14, when luteinizing hormone secrete, it will come and will act on this Graafian follicle, and from this Graafian follicle it will release this ova. You can see here this ova, right? This luteinizing hormone actually it act on this Graafian follicle, and by different mechanism it increase the pressure, and that, and as a result of that, ova will release to the oviduct or fallopian tube. Is it clear? But I will not go to the mechanism of how the luteinizing hormone increase the pressure. Actually, it increase the blood supply to this Graafian follicle, and let the pressure create, and as a result of that, ova release. But we will not go to in detail to that. Just keep it in your mind that ova release to the fallopian tube. Now, this process happen on day 14. So it means on day 14, the process of ovulation happen under the influence of luteinizing hormone. Okay. Now, this, well, let's suppose it is, let's suppose, for example, it is February, right? And this one is, this finger-like projection of fallopian tube is called February. Okay. Now, this one, let's suppose this is uterus, okay, and this is cervix, and this one is female vagina, right? So you can see here, for example, this is ova, right? So this ova came toward this fallopian tube, okay. Now, when it came to the fallopian tube, this process, the release of ova from the ovary to the fallopian tube, this is called ovulation, and it happened under the influence of luteinizing hormone on day 14, right? Now you can see here this ovary to the fallopian tube, and here this cells, this Graafian follicle cells, it remain here. So this luteinizing hormone will convert it into yellowish body. You can see it, this yellowish body. This yellowish body is called corpus luteum. Corpus luteum, it means yellowish body. Luteum means yellowish and corpus mean body. So corpus luteum, there is a special pigment, because of that it is yellowish. Okay, now this corpus luteum will start production of progesterone, but along with progesterone they can also there is this corpus luteum will also secreting estrogen, but progesterone will be more as compared to estrogen. So this progesterone and estrogen now, it's actually, estrogen is doing to make it's making or repairing or making thick the uterus lining, while this progesterone will also do the same function, but it will also increase the blood supply more. It will make this blood vessel, you can see here, it make it more coil. It means it develop the blood vessel more to the uterus. Okay, why? Because if you see here, the chances of baby coming to the uterus is now increased. Why? Because we go toward the fallopian tube, so the fertilization chances is more. For that, the endometrium lining should be more thick and more vascularized, and that function do by whom? That will be done by progesterone, and this progesterone make it more thick. It actually maintain this endometrium lining, it so that it may not want it out again, it may not shed. So for that maintenance, it increase the blood supply by development of blood vessel. It make this blood vessel more coil. So if it make it more coil, it means more blood vessel came here. It also warm this uterus, right? It's, when progesterone release, at that time, a little bit female temperature also increase. Okay, another function of this progesterone is it make thick the cervical fluid. It make it thick so that it's not allow more sperm entry to the female body. Okay, now, you know up to here, this corpus luteum is actually producing progesterone, and that are maintaining the endometrium line. And the ova reach here. So for that ova, the sperm already reach here and they fertilize. This ova right now, it is fertilized. You can see it here now. For example, it is the fertilized ova now. Means that is zygote. Zygote will do what? It will start mitotic division, and it will start to form embryo, right? And that embryo will reach to uterus. Now the uterus already met what? Uterus is already vascularized, and it's the endometrium lining, the inner lining of the uterus is thick, so that 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 embryo will come and will implant here. The place where it implant, from the uterus lining, the placenta formation will start. But when the placenta formation start from that cells, a special hormone will release, and that hormone is called HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, HCG. This HCG is actually the message, or it is actually indication. This HCG is indication for corpus luteum to be remain there and do and like continue production of progesterone and estrogen, so that the endometrium lining maintain. For that, this HCG is an indication for corpus luteum to be remain there. Now let's see up to when this corpus luteum will remain. Up to placenta development. When placenta fully develop and they start production of their own progesterone. After this, that corpus luteum will become inactive. Then no need of corpus luteum, because placenta will start production of their own progesterone, and that will maintain the endometrium line. Okay, but it is one case. At this time, pregnancy happen. This HCG hormone is also like indication of pregnancy mostly, and pregnancy test, they are actually detecting this HCG. If HCG is positive, it means that female is pregnant. Okay, so one side is this. Now let's suppose if sperm didn't reach here to the ova and no fertilization happened. Let's suppose no fertilization happened. So what will happen? This embryo will not reach to uterus. If it's not reached to uterus, so the placenta formation will not start. So if placenta formation not start, HCG will not produce. If HCG not produce, so there will be no any indication, there will be no any stimulation for the corpus luteum to be remain. Corpus luteum, if there is no any message for corpus luteum, so what will happen? Corpus luteum after 10 days, it will become inactive. It will stop production of progesterone. And when it stop production of progesterone and estrogen, so what will happen? This, there will be no support for this endometrium lining. And this endometrium lining will be start degradation, and it will be start shedding. Okay, and when it starts shedding, like that started, so usually it's when it starts shedding, so again day one will start. It means day one, then this is the phase of what? Menstruation, the bleeding time. Okay, now in this time again what will happen? Hypothalamus will be activated. Hypothalamus will be activated, and hypothalamus will detect it that the progesterone and estrogen decrease in the body. So the hypothalamus will detect that, and it will start FSH and follicle stimulating hormone release again, so that it mature, it make maturation of other primary follicle, and so that it make like it develop another ova for the ovulation. So it means another cycle started here, right? Let's suppose if the pregnancy happen, right? It means implantation happen. So this corpus luteum are producing estrogen and progesterone. At that time, remember, this estrogen and progesterone having negative feedback on LH and FSH. LH and FSH will not produce, because this progesterone and estrogen inhibiting what? FSH and LH production. Why it inhibiting? So that at the same time another ova may not release. Okay, to prevent, because one ova is under develop, maybe they may implant to prevent double pregnancy. For that, progesterone and estrogen having negative feedback on FSH and LH. Remember this point, it's an important point. I think it is clear. Is it clear to all? Okay, so if you see here, so the pairs menstruation pairs, proliferative pairs, secretory pairs. Why? Because estrogen and progesterone hormone is it like it peak in that stage, the female body having more hormone, and when it reach to day one, again menstruation will start. Why menstruation start? Because there is no support for the endometrium lining of uterus to be maintained. There is no support of the hormone that is required, and that is progesterone. Okay, is it clear? All right, now let's move toward another. You can see here in this, like you can see here, this is the different hormones in the female body. You can see here in day 14, I told you already, luteinizing hormone is more. There is and in day 14, first what happened, this estrogen level increase and FSH level increase, that having positive effect, positive feedback effect on the luteinizing hormone. So because of that luteinizing hormone release, one luteinizing hormone release, so what happened, the from the Graafian follicles ova will release, ovulation happen, right? So you can see here first you can see this FSH, it is increasing, and because of that this primary follicle converted to secondary, and then they convert into Graafian follicle, and then ovary, then when estrogen level increase in the body, that stimulate luteinizing hormone to be released. And when luteinizing hormone release, so what happened, from the ova, the from the Graafian follicle, ova release, and that process is ovulation. So it means on day 14 ovulation. And this Graafian follicle, the cells, that sac that remain, it will convert into corpus luteum, and that will start production of progesterone, right? And after ovulation, there will be increase of progesterone. Why? Because this corpus luteum will start production of progesterone, and this progesterone will maintain the endometrium lining thick. It will maintain the endometrium lining and vascularize the endometrium lining. Vascularize means develop blood vessel to that, and it will increase the blood supply to the endometrium lining of uterus, right? And this is called luteal phase because of the development of corpus luteum. You can see here in this diagram, it is the bleeding phase, like this called menses. Why? Because there is no support of progesterone hormone, so the bleeding is happening, the shedding of endometrium lining of a uterus happening here. In this phase, this is proliferative phase. Proliferative phase means development of endometrium lining again start in this phase, and you can see here it become thick, right? And in this phase, it's completely developed endometrium lining, it's secretory phase. In this phase, there is more hormones in the female body, right? I think it is clear now. Now you can see here like how this is happening. So first we will move toward the menstrual cycle is the monthly cycle of hormonal change in the female reproductive cycle system. It's controlled by hormone from the ovary and brain, the part of brain I told you, hypothalamus. So first of all, in the first day 1 to 5, the uterus lining break down, and this is called menstruation. You can see here, this is endometrium lining. Day 5 to 14, a hormone is released from the brain which causes the egg follicles inside the ovary to grow. It means a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone that will start the egg follicle to grow and make the ova mature, right? It means it's converting primary follicle into secondary follicle here. Okay, you can see here now, this estrogen is released from the egg follicles. Is it grow and mature? The estrogen cause the uterus lining to thick. The estrogen will release, I told you already, it will release by whom? By secondary follicle. It will release by secondary follicle and Graafian follicle. This estrogen will make this endometrium lining thick. You can see this will make the endometrium lining thick. Okay. All right. So this endometrium lining become thick under the influence of estrogen hormone. And also, this is now Graafian follicle. It is fully mature follicle. This ova is ready for to be released outside, right? So let us see. The level of hormone released from the brain peak. The which hormone? The level of estrogen will increase, and when estrogen increase, that having positive that having positive effect of luteinizing on luteinizing hormone. The luteinizing hormone will increase, and that luteinizing hormone will release the ova from from the ovary to the fallopian tube. Yeah. After that, day 14 to 21, the egg travel to the uterus and a different type of hormone released by the empty follicle. What is that different type of hormone? The empty follicle means the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum will produce progesterone, and this progesterone will maintain this endometrium lining. And now it travel toward the fallopian tube. Okay, now if the egg is not fertilized. Now the egg is not fertilized. Let's see. The amount of hormone produced by follicle start to decrease. The amount of hormone. The amount of hormone means the progesterone that is producing by corpus luteum that will be decreased, and when that decrease, so there will be no support for this endometrium lining, and when there is no support for endometrium lining to be maintained, so what will happen? Again menstruation will start, and the uterus lining will soon break down again, and a new cycle will start. Right? I think it's clear. Hope it's clear to all. So thank you so much.